Hello, and welcome back to Sharing a Chapter a Day. This is Do, Ra, me, and today I will be reading Chapter 150 of Engagement in Peril by Dara, Odoe, Sok. Chapter 150 is titled Shinshin's Realization and Rapture. You know, Shinshin's last night of life on Earth was spent with me in my bed. It's sort of like he had already planned it out and how he was going to die. Around 1 that morning, he came into my room and asked if he can lie next to me. Now, in my already sleepy stupor, I thought nothing of it. After all, he was my best friend, and it's not like it was the first time we had shared a bed together before. We have done it several times before during our heyday in the military and such. I agreed, and he came into the room and under the sheet with me that night. During our last few minutes, we spoke while in bed side by side. Shin said a few things that reminded and remain in me to this very day. Before we got to talking that early morning, with the lights on, we both sat up on my bed and talked. I was mesmerized while looking at Shinshin at his bare chest and upper body. He had many battle scars on and about his arms, his chest, his abdomen and back. The old wounds and scars were from his many missions and combats while he was involved with the Force Recon and SEALs. He had bullet wounds, knife slashes, and shrapnel indentation all over him, and yet he was still smiling. It's always that smirk about him that gets me all giddy. I too have several scars and wounds upon my body and abdomen, but not as many or as interesting as Shinshin had. I realized then that he had gone through so much, being born with such hardship ever since he was an infant, going from home to homes as a minor, and living on his own these many years. He was my best friend and my beloved. I had wronged him so very much, and he's still with me. Shinshin had told me how much has appreciated our friendship and all the shit we had been through together. At times I would laugh and snicker at his gay remarks. He just wanted me to listen while he said his piece that early morning. He told me of all the shit he had gone with. He told me of all the shit that has gone on with his life and how the horrible horror took advantage of him. He had also mentioned her reckless, conniving mother, that bitch of a mother, Lilith, who took advantage of him as well. I also mentioned to him that I was also in the wrong and apologized for my misery against him as well for involving myself with that STD-filled bitch. He said that he had already forgiven me, that I shouldn't worry my mind about it any further. He had forgiven me. My best friend had forgiven me for my fallacy against him. He told me that I was the only one that he could entrust with his miserable life so far. That morning, that early morning, he opened up his heart to me that night and poured out his suffering unto me. He told me of his loving mother, Kushina, who died while giving birth to him. He talked about his bastard father who raped his mom when she was a teen. He told me about the Taylors who adopted him and brought him to the States and how tragically they had died as well. He told me of the foster home he was at and how he met the most wonderful person, who was Detective Hampton in San Pedro. He told me about his heyday and the local gang and he told me about his heydays with the local gang and his trouble with the law and such and why he had to join the armed services in the first place. He went on to mention how happy he was when he finally met his blood relatives in England and Europe, meeting his grandfather and his mother's sibling. And he told me how he had found true love in Delilah, that horrible, horrible disease-infested succubus, and how disappointed he was when he found out that she had been unfaithful with other guys, including myself, and how his world was turned upside down when she infected him with STDs, MRSA, MRSA, and all sorts of nasty shit. That really drove him over the edge, he had stated. That sort of shit pushed him over the edge. Now, still in my half asleep state, I didn't really take most of it to heart. I wasn't really paying attention to what Shinshin, my beloved Shinshin, was saying. After a few good minutes of his speech and ranting, we both fell asleep in each other's arm. We awoke the next morning with my alarm clock. One of my alarm clock radio went off around 7 that morning. I woke to Shinshin's cuddling and snuggling at my side. where I had drool over his shoulders from last night's slumber. I shoved him awake and told him that I had to go get ready to go to work this morning. I have a sub job at Lincoln Elementary down the street. And I promised to bring him some of his favorite food for lunch. He allowed me to leave his side that morning to freshen up, while he stayed behind and slumbered the rest of the day in my cozy, warm bed. You know, several days before our night in each other's warmth and embraces, Shinshin and I had gotten into a little fist quarrel after I had confessed and told him of my involvements with Delilah, his so-called love. After his court arraignment regarding the harassment and restraining stay-away order, and once we were home, that afternoon after we shared a meal or two and I finally had the guts to come clean with him, I explained to him in meticulous detail of my involvements with that bitch of a whore, Delilah. During my explanation and confessions, Shinshin refused to believe what I was telling him. He wanted nothing to do with it. He just couldn't believe that I, his best friend of many years, would do this to him. He was practically we were practically brothers since basic, and there I was stabbing him in the heart. I had to show him proofs of pictures and videos that that bitch had made for and with other guys. Yes, that bitch had the audacity to make sex video with other guys, with her jacking off and masturbating and such. I explained calmly and meticulously that night of all that had conspired between me and Delilah. At times, Shinshin was quite upset with me. He gave me a couple of shoves here and there, but he didn't want to hurt me one bit. I would have allowed him to beat the shit out of me, but he refused to do it. He just simply stood there against one of our apartment's wall, with his arm tucked in each other and allowing me to explain and tell him everything that there was to tell. While I told my stories of deviancy and sexual conquest over Delilah, his face turned from shock to disgust. He knew and realized then that this girl had been quite dirty. She had been insanely dirty. Maybe that's why he was having all these boils and abscess, which had messed with his health and once chiseled body. After all my stories and of events that had happened between his lover and me, with some thoughts and concern he accepted my apologies and reassured me that our long-time friendship was much stronger than what that girl had done to him and his once youthful soul. He just couldn't understand why I hadn't come to tell him sooner all about this. Well, I had no explanation. I explained because I too didn't know what that myself, and that I was having my fill and getting my ends, that I was having too much fun fucking around with that bitch of a whore. I deeply regret what had happened between me and Delilah. To this day, I am still apologizing to Shinshin, even after his death. Thank you for listening. This is the end of chapter 150. Be on the lookout for chapter 151, titled Court Hearing. This is Do, Ra, me, and I'll see you later. Thank you.